Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome one and all on today's lecture, that is Indifference Curve Analysis. This is fifth module of this series. In the last lecture, we have learned about the utility analysis. Utility we mean want satisfying power of a commodity, the value in use of a commodity. When we consume the commodity, that will gives us some satisfaction, happiness, which is called as utility. Utility measured in terms of number as per Marshall 1, 2, 3, 4. Cardinal measurement is possible. But here in this concept of indifference curve analysis, we assume utility is ordinal. Means utility cannot be measured in terms of numbers, but it is ordinal, means it can be just ranked. So after completion of this module, you will be able to learn the first concept of indifference curve, second, properties of indifference curve, third, budget line, then marginal rate of substitutions, consumer equilibrium, and income consumption curve. Indifference curve is a graph showing combination of two goods that give the consumer equal satisfaction and utility. Each point on indifference curve indicates that a consumer is indifferent between the two, and all points give him equal or same utility. Graphically, the indifference curve is shown or drawn as a downward sloping convex to the origin. The graph shows a combination of two goods that the consumer consumes. This concept was developed by British economist Ashworth in 1881. Further, it was improved by Pareto in 1913 and Johnson in 1915, and lastly, final version of this curve given by Hicks Allen in 1934. In simple words, indifference curve is a curve which shows the different combination of two goods yielding equal satisfaction to the consumer. All points on a indifference curve gives the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Consumer is indifferent on indifference curve. An indifference curve shows the combination of two products or services to which the consumer is different at a particular level of income. An indifference curve is a curve that measures the amount of different goods consumed by the consumer. Each point on the curve gives exactly the same level of satisfaction for a given consumer. Indifference curve is a line drawn in two-dimensional space showing different combination of two goods from which the consumer draws the same amount of utility, and therefore he or she is indifferent about the combination. Equal satisfaction on all points. Let us discuss this indifference curve through a schedule. Indifference curve schedule refers to that schedule indicate different combination of two yielding equal satisfaction, which provide equal satisfaction. It explained with the help of following table. For example, this. See, first column, combination. We have combination of A, B, C, D, E, F. A combination provides 1 of X and 10 of Y. You have choice, the consumer has choice that he can use 1 X and 10 of Y. But the satisfaction will be equal. Say equal to 10. Even if he purchase the B combination, which where 2 of X, 7 of Y, but the level of satisfaction will be equal, that is maybe 10. Even if he consume or purchase the C combination, 3 or 5, again the satisfaction will be equal. D, 4, 4, the combination, when he purchase, satisfaction level will be same. Any combination, if the consumer purchase, that will give equal satisfaction. Any combination on this graph. Here, this is the utility curve. Sorry, the indifference curve. Indifference curve, downward sloping, convex to the origin. We'll discuss properties also. But this here, y-axis we have y commodity and x-axis we have x commodity, and this u1 is indifference curve. Indifference curve, and any combination here on this graph, any combination. This shows the locus of points of various combination of two goods, x and y, which gives equal satisfaction to the consumer. So any combination when you consume from this graph, that will give equal satisfaction to the consumer. Consumer will be indifferent. When we have more than one indifference curve, for example, indifference curve 1, 2, indifference curve 3, 4, and so on, the group of indifference curve, this is known as the family of indifference curve of indifference map. Indifference map means when we put more than 1, 2, 3 curve is called as indifference map. Indifference map. Now, you know that I have earlier discussed with you that assumptions is very, very important in any concept of economics. So here again we have to assume something. Before discussing the indifference curve, Hickson, this curve, we have to assume something. First assumption of indifference curve is a rational consumer. It is assumed that the consumer is rational and will make his choice objectively to have an increased utility and the satisfaction. He always try to get maximum satisfaction with his given income. Utility is ordinal. Means utility can be measured in ordinal numbers, means we can just rank the utility. We cannot express the utility in terms of numbers 1, 2, 3. Here we have to assume utility is ordinal. We can rank. Consumer can rank. Diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Diminishing marginal rate of substitution, we mean it is assumed that marginal rate of substitution diminishes as more and more units of one goods consumed, and the next has to be leave. Indifference curve That's why it is convex to the origin. This satisfaction level cannot be measured. That's why the consumer ranks his preferences. And diminishing marginal rate of substitution means when he consume more unit of X, then he has to give up the some unit of the Y. Simultaneously, both unit cannot be increased. Consistency and transitivity. It is assumed that the consumer is not saturated with the both commodities and look for more benefits of these two to have higher curve and have more satisfaction. He always try to get more satisfaction. Convexity, the indifference curve will be convex to the origin. Downward sloping, left to right, we have to assume. Even only two goods are to be taken into consideration. It is assumed that consumer has to make the choice between two goods to provide their prices and other thing remain constant. We assume that the commodity which the consumer is consuming or purchasing, the prices remain constant. So these are some of the important assumptions. By assuming these assumptions, we can draw the indifference curve analysis. And the main motive of discuss this indifference curve is to know the consumer equilibrium. To know the consumer equilibrium, there are two analytical tools. One is indifference curve and second is budget line. To know the consumer equilibrium, we must have these two analytical tools. One is indifference curve and another one, this is the budget line. We'll discuss one by one all these in detail. Now, what are the properties of indifference curve, which is very, very important? Downward sloping, left to the right. The first property of indifference curve, that it will always left to the right and downward sloping, left to the right and downward sloping. Indifference curve for two goods are generally negatively sloped. This is the first property. Indifference curve are generally convex to the origin. No, exceptions are there. We'll discuss exceptions also. But indifference curve generally convex to the origin, reflecting the principle of diminishing returns, law of diminishing returns. Indifference curve never intersect or cross each other. First properties we can see with the help of this diagram. Indifference curve, here X commodity X and commodity Y. X-axis we have X commodity and on the Y axis we have Y commodity, and IC is indifference curve. IC is the indifference curve. Now, all combinations on this curve of two goods provides equal satisfaction to the consumer, whether A, whether B, whether C. But the point is here, if you want to consume A, then maybe here more of X and less of X and more of Y. And B, now X2, Y2. The property is that indifference curve will always be negative slope, downward sloping, convex to the origin. Convex to the origin. Convex to the origin, reflecting the principle of diminishing return. And another important the property of this curve is this curve will never neither touch x-axis or nor y-axis. Indifference curve will never touch x-axis or neither y-axis. This is, we have to assume that it will never touch x and y-axis. Indifference curve neither cross each other and or never intersect each other like this. This is against the property of indifference curve. This curve shows. See why this happened. Two indifference curve never cross or intersect each other. It is because at the point of tendency, the higher curve will give much as of the two combination as is given by the lower indifference curve. Higher indifference curve provides higher satisfaction to the consumer. That's why these two indifference curve will never intersect each other or cross each other. Next property of indifference curve is, I have already told you that higher indifference curve indicate higher satisfaction level. Indifference curve neither touch x-axis or nor y-axis. Indifference curve need not be parallel with each other. It can be any shape. It is not compulsory that both indifference curves should be parallel with each other, to each other. No, it can be any shape, but it should be convex to the origin. Downward sloping. The slope of an indifference curve reflects the degree of substitutability of two goods for one another. Like this way, indifference curve, there is no need to be parallel with each other. Indifference curve need not be parallel with each other. And higher indifference curve provides higher level of satisfaction. IC2 provide more satisfaction to the consumer as compared to IC1. IC3 gives more satisfaction to the consumer as compared to IC2 or IC1. So higher indifference curve provides higher satisfaction to the consumer. They are exceptional to the properties of indifference curve, like straight line. Although we have to assume that indifference curve will never be straight line, indifference curve always convex to the origin. But there are some exception to the properties of indifference curve, like straight line. Here x-axis we have x commodity and y-axis y commodity. Although indifference curve cannot be straight line, but if the commodities are perfect substitute, when you substitute x with y or y with x, perfectly substitute, equal percentage, equal ratio, the consumer indifference curve can be then straight line in case of perfect substitute. When we purchase or when we substitute commodity in perfectly equal ratio mein, and then indifference curve can be straight line. Indifference curve can L shape also. This is again the exception to the properties of indifference curve. But this will happen if the commodities are complementary in nature. Indifference curve at every point of which utility would remain same, but indifference curve of the perfect complementary goods, when the goods are perfect complementary in nature, then maybe indifference curve can be L shape. Perfectly complementary in nature, then indifference curve can be L shape. Another exception to the properties of indifference curve, concave to the origin. Although this is not possible, we have not assumed this is beyond our assumption, but these are some exception. An indifference curve can be concave. The concave shape of indifference curve is exception to the properties of indifference curve, like this one. We have to assume the assumption of indifference curve is it is always convex to the origin. Now, the budget line. I have told you that the main objective of discussing the indifference curve to know the consumer equilibrium. And we need two analytical tools. One we have already discussed, that is indifference curve analysis, indifference curve. And second one, the budget line, which is also called as the price line. A budget line or price line is a line which shows all the different possible combination of two goods that a consumer can purchase given his income and the price of the two goods. A line which shows the combination of two goods that a consumer can purchase with his given income by assuming other things remain constant is called as budget line. Budget line is a line drawn in a two-dimensional space representing the certain level of income with which the consumer can purchase various combination of two goods at given prices. See, we can see with the help of this diagram about the budget line. X-axis we have X commodity, Y-axis we have Y commodity, and this line, for example AB line, this is blue line, shows the budget line or price line, income line. This shows the combination of two goods, say X and Y. Any combination on this budget line the consumer can purchase. And when the income of the consumer will increase, any change in one or more parameters of the budget line, income or price, will result the shift in its position. Any change in income, any change in price, the budget line will shift. The position or slope of budget line or price line depends upon the two factors: income of the consumer and price of two goods. I'm again repeating, the position of slope of budget line depends upon two factors. One, income of the consumer. Two, the price of two goods. Price of two goods. Now, let us discuss with the help of diagram change in income of the consumer. If the price of two goods remain unchanged, for example, there is no change in the price of two goods, say X and Y, with an increase in income, budget line will shift a right hand side. And with a decrease in income, it will shift left hand side. Its slope remain unchanged, but slope will be remain unchanged. When income of the consumer will increase, the budget line will shift a right hand side. When the income will decrease, it will shift left hand side. Let us see with the help of diagram. Change in income of the consumer can be seen with the help of following diagram like this. When income will increase, it will shift. For example, this AB is this is the A is the original budget line. When income will increase, this line will shift right hand side. A to C, B to D, C D. This shift is due to increase in the income of the consumer. When income will fall, this line will shift left hand side. Decrease in budget line or price line. So increase of income will shift right hand side this budget line, and decrease in income will shift left hand side. For example, when your income is 10,000 rupees, AB shows for example 10,000. When it will be 15,000, then this will shift right hand side. When income will increase 10,000 to 15,000, the budget line will shift right hand side. When income will reduce 10,000 to 5,000, then it will fall left hand side. Now, for example, change in the price of commodity. There are two important factors we have discussed. One, we'll discuss two important factors. One, income, change in income. Then what will happen in the slope of the budget line? Although slope will unchanged. Second, if change in the price of a commodity, if income of the consumer remain constant, the price of one commodity remain unchanged, but the price of other commodity change, then what will happen? The slope of the budget line or price line. The change can be explained with the help of following diagram. If the price of one commodity, for example, we have two commodity. A is a consumable product, or maybe food items, and B is the non-food item. For example, we have two commodities, one is food item, another is non-food items. Now we assume that there is no change in the price of food item, but if the change in the price of non-food item, then what will happen in the slope of budget line or price line? Here, for example, one item is banana and second is apple, and AB is the budget line. Now assume there is no change in the price of banana. There is no change in the price of the banana, but the price of apple, there is a change in the price of apple. For example, the price of apple will decrease. Apple become cheaper as compared to banana. There is no change in banana, but apples become cheaper. Then budget line will shift A to A1. Now why this will shift right hand side A to A1? Because of when the price of apple will reduce. Earlier consumer was purchasing OA commodity, but when the price will reduce, the fundamental law of economics, the law of demand says higher the price, lower the demand, and lower the price, higher will be the demand. So when price will reduce, the consumer will purchase more unit of X, that is A to A1. This right hand shift of this curve is due to reduce in the price of apple. Now suppose the price of apple will increase now. If the price of apple increase, it means apple become more costly as compared to this A point. Now it's more costly. So what will happen? Higher the price, lower the demand. So this budget line will shift this side. It means we can purchase less of the apple as compared to OA. Now we'll able to purchase only A2. The slope of budget line will change due to change in the price of one of the commodities, while the price of other commodities and consumers' income remain unchanged. Here we are assuming that the income of the consumer remain unchanged and the price of B is also unchanged. There is no change in the price of B, only the change in price of apple. And if we assume that price of apple remain unchanged and the price of banana will change, then same diagram will be here. If the price of banana will decrease, then consumer will purchase more of this banana, and if the price will increase, then the consumer will be able to purchase less unit of banana. So this is called change or shift in budget line price. But here we have to assume that the price of one commodity remain unchanged with the price of another commodity change, like this. Now for example, if the price of banana change but apple remain constant and the price of banana change, then what will happen? This price will increase, then this will shift B to B2. AB budget line shift AB to B2. When price will reduce of banana, then it will shift this side. A B1. Shift in change in price of the commodity by assuming that the price of one commodity out of two remain unchanged and even the income of the consumer, there is no change. The slope of budget line change due to change in the price of one commodity, while the price of another commodity and consumers income remain unchanged. We have to assume this thing. Then this diagram, this will be shift in the price line of a commodity. Now let us discuss the consumer equilibrium. When a consumer is getting maximum satisfaction with his limited income, he will be said that he is in equilibrium. He is in a equilibrium position. Consumer equilibrium refers which a consumer with his given income and the prices he purchased such a combination of two goods which will gives him the maximum satisfaction is called consumer equilibrium, and he don't want to change that position. But again, the consumer equilibrium based on some assumptions. The analysis of the consumer equilibrium based on some assumptions. The consumer income remain unchanged, constant, we have to assume. The consumer knows the price of all things and price of all commodities are given. Consumer is rational, means he always try to get maximum satisfaction with his given income. And consumer can spend his income in small unit, small quantities. Consumer is fully aware of the indifference map, means he is rational, he can rank the commodity as per his preference, and goods are divisible. By assuming these assumptions, we can explain the consumer equilibrium. Consumer equilibrium, it is found that the tendency of the budget line and the convex indifference curve. The following two conditions. The price line should be tangent to the indifference point curve and indifference curve should be convex to the origin. The point where budget line will be tangent with the indifference curve is called the consumer equilibrium. consumer equilibrium. Consumer don't want to change his position. Consumer equilibrium. Consumer is getting maximum satisfaction from his given income, and the point where budget line will be tangent with the indifference curve is called as consumer equilibrium. Let us see with the help of diagram. This is the budget line, and for example u2 is indifference curve, u1 again the indifference curve. Now consumer, for example, let's see again one more indifference curve. Consumer cannot purchase any combination or combination C because of C is beyond his capacity. If you want to purchase C, then indifference curve should be here, budget line should be here. It means consumer can purchase any combination of goods, only this budget line. Any combination beyond this budget line, for example C, D or some more, is not attainable because of this is beyond the capacity of the consumer. But on this line, when he will purchase any combination on this line, that will be called that yes, the consumer is rational and he is utilizing his full resources. Less than this budget line, underutilization, under capacity. Now what is the equilibrium? I have told you that the point where budget line will be tangent with the indifference curve, this E is the equilibrium point, where marginal rate of marginal rate of substitution, price of X is divided by price of Y is here. When the consumer will purchase, OX and OY commodity, OX and OY commodity, then this point shows the consumer equilibrium. If the consumer, no doubt, he can purchase a combination of goods also. But if you see here, more of Y and less of X. Although he is able to purchase any combination on this line, but if he purchase, for example, a combination, then consumer is not a rational consumer. Why? Because of his purchasing more of X, Y and less of X. If you purchase B, then more of X and less of Y. So A, B is not the consumer equilibrium, D is the under equilibrium, E is the optimum point, E is the consumer equilibrium, where consumer is getting maximum satisfaction, or the point E is a point where consumer budget line is tangent with the indifference curve. Now marginal rate of substitution. The marginal rate of substitution can be defined as the rate at which consumer is willing to substitute one product for other, maintaining the same level of utility, same level of satisfaction. The rate of substitution, marginal rate of substitution, can be defined as the rate at which consumer is willing to substitute one product for other, maintaining the same level of utility. There is no change in the satisfaction level. Like this. Utility is same, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. There is no change in utility. Consumer, if the consumer purchase 15 of X, 1 of Y, 11 of X, 2 of Y, satisfaction level remain constant. There is no change. 8, 3, 6, 4, 5, 5. The marginal rate of substitution here, 4, 1. This minus this 4 and 2 minus 1, 1. 11 minus 8, 3, 3 minus 1, 3 minus 2, 1. Here 8 minus 6, 2, 4 minus 3. So 3, 2 is 1, 1, 1. marginal rate of substitution, like this. This curve shows the marginal rate of substitutions. More of cloth, less of, for example, this 6 cloth, 1 food, this satisfaction level here 20. Even when he purchased 2 of X, 2 of food, and 3 cloth, then again satisfaction will be, utility will be 20. Here 3 and 2, the satisfaction again will be equal to 20. So consumers indifference curve or through or marginal rate of substitutions. This will happen if the if you the commodity perfectly substitutes, then it can be straight line. For example, you can example Mirinda or Pepsi, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, any. When you perfectly substitute, then it can be straight line. We have already discussed this. In case of perfectly complements, we have already discussed that. Marginal rate of substitute, when commodities are perfectly complements, it will be L shape, kinked. When commodities are perfectly complements, sorry. For example, sugar and milk. For example, bread and butter. For example, pen and ink. Then the marginal rate of substitutions, in the case of indifference curve, will be like this. Now, income consumption curve. Income consumption curve. Income consumption curve. For example, first, this is the income line. Here, this indifference curve. Consumer is equilibrium on A point. A point is the tendency point, where budget line is tangent with his indifference curve, with indifference curve with the consumer. Then A1, when income increase, the budget line shift, the new equilibrium point here. Then more income increase, or even the price of both commodity will reduce, the budget line will shift. It means we can purchase more of the commodity. And with the reduce, when the price of both commodity will reduce in same position, same direction, the budget line will shift. If the price of commodity will reduce, budget line will shift this side. Price of both commodity will increase, then budget line will shift left hand side. So A1, A2, for example, these are the consumer equilibriums. Consumer equilibrium. We have to assume that the taste, preferences, price remain constant and the goods are normal. This is very, very important. The goods are normal. In case of inferior goods, we cannot draw the income consumption curve. When consumer will shift A to this point from here, and when we draw a line by joining all these points, this will be called the income consumption line, income consumption curve, like here. Income consumption curve. When we join all the equilibrium point, when the first equilibrium point is A, when consumers income increase, the budget line shift this side. Consumer now in equilibrium here. We have already discussed the higher indifference curve provide higher satisfaction to the consumer. But to purchase that, the combination of that particular, the indifference curve, you must have the income. As your income increase, budget line shift. And when we join all these points, we have a straight line which is called as the income consumption curve. But this straight line will be if the commodities are normal. if the commodities are inferior, because of as income increases, we can see demand for inferior good decrease. Here X is inferior goods, Y is in maybe normal goods. When budget will increase L2, L2 or L3, consumer now can purchase less of X and more of Y. For example, this earlier the consumer, there's no shift in budget line. For example, this if combination where Y as well as X almost same, the demand of the product. But when more income increases, the budget line shift here. If the X is inferior, then the quantity demanded of X reduce, whereas there is no change in quantity demand of Y. See this diagram. Now, if more income increase, X is because of X is inferior goods. So if you join a point here, then you can see that now the demand of X is less as compared to this, and there is no change in demand of Y. It means this will happen in case of inferior goods. Inferior goods are those whose demand will reduce or decrease with the increase of income of the consumer. Now, let us conclude. We have discussed that indifference curve is a graph that shows the combination of two goods which give equal satisfaction to the consumer. Any combination on indifference curve provide equal satisfaction to the consumer. Indifference curve. Although indifference curve are based on some assumptions. For example, we have assumed that the consumers are rational. He always try to get his maximum satisfaction with his income. He try to maximize his satisfaction with his limited income. Utility is ordinal. We can just rank the utility. Cardinal measurement is not possible in case of indifference curve. This satisfaction level cannot be measured, thus consumer rank the preferences. Marginal rate of substitution. It is assumed that the marginal rate of substitution diminishes as more unit of good have to be set off by the reduction of in one units and the other commodity. That's why the indifference curve will be convex to the origin. Convex to the origin. Two indifference curves never intersect each other. Higher the indifference curve provides higher satisfaction to the consumer. Any indifference curve neither touch x-axis nor y-axis. And some more important points on the indifference curve, like to know the consumer equilibrium, we must have the budget line. Budget line is a line which shows the combination of two goods that a consumer can purchase, and the point where budget line will be tangent with the indifference curve is called the consumer equilibrium. So we have also examined with the help of both budget line as well as the indifference curve the consumer equilibrium. And lastly, the marginal rate of substitution, income consumption curve. What will happen in the income of the consumer if the price of two goods change? when the price of both commodity change, for example, if the price of both commodity reduce, consumer can purchase more of the both goods, the budget line will shift right hand side. When the price of both commodity increase, for example, budget line shift left hand side, and the consumer equilibrium will change simultaneously. We have also discussed shift in price line by assuming that price of two commodities, the price of one commodity remain unchanged and the price of another commodity constant. When we assume that the price of one commodity, for example, say food item, remain constant and non-food item change, if the price of non-food item, for example, increase, then consumer can purchase less of the non-food items. The budget line will shift, price line will shift left hand side. When the price of non-food item will reduce, it means the price line or budget line will shift right hand side. Here consumer can purchase more of the commodities. So all these we have discussed in context to the indifference curve analysis. So finally, indifference curve is nothing but it is a curve which shows the combination of two goods which consumer can purchase and consumer will get equal satisfaction on the all combination of that graph. Thank you very much.